Hi, welcome to the Brief Book Reviews channel, otherwise known as An Old Guy Reviews the Book that he's read this week. So what's the old guy read this week? Well, the book I've read this week is this one. It's called Death of the White Hart by author Chris Chibnall. It was released here in the United Kingdom by Michael Joseph as a hardback on the 27th of March 2025, and it's the author's debut novel. People will be familiar with the name Chris Chibnall because he's a well-known screenwriter, playwright, executive producer, etc. But this is his first move into writing a novel, previously better known for his TV work. And indeed, people will know him for the TV series Broadchurch, which was a very successful series. Good actors, good script, well written, and much liked by the UK TV and TV viewing audience. And he also contributed to Doctor Who and Torchwood. So this guy's got previous. Doesn't always work when a screenwriter moves to writing a novel, but thankfully this time it did. And this is a really good first effort. Really enjoyed it. But less of the waffle cliff. What's it all about, I hear you say? Well, the central character is called Nicola Bridge. She's a detective sergeant. She's worked in the CID up in a large city in Liverpool. But she's returned to her home down in West Dorset, a place called Fleetcombe. She's moved back to Fleetcombe with her husband Mike, her son, 17-year-old son Ethan. And the book opens where Nicola's clearly not entirely settled. And as the book goes on, we understand the reason why. It's not just that Nicola has wanted to leave the big city to come to the peace and quiet of rural Dorset. There's a problem with her relationship with Mike. Mike has basically been playing away from home, and they've moved down to Dorset to start again to sort of recalibrate their relationship. So Nicola's used to a large police department with lots of resources. Back in Fleetcombe, she's working out of an old bank which is next to the police station, and her police resources, her crew, if you will, are two people. One's called DC Harry Ward. He's come in through the graduate entry scheme. They call him Westlife because he looks like he's quite young and handsome, looks like a member of a boy band, so his nickname within the police station is Westlife. And another older guy called Mel, who doesn't really leave the station, but is very good with stats and gathering information. So she's gone from a large team up in Liverpool to two people, one who is bright, mustard keen, but wet behind the ears, and one who isn't exactly Mr. Dynamo and has quite a dour countenance. So that's the setup. Book kicks off with Nicola getting a call, 3:17 in the morning, and turns out there's been some sort of incident on a major road coming out of Fleetcombe on the A35, and it needs to be sorted. She turns up to find what is a fairly gruesome scene. There's a gentleman basically tied to a chair in the middle of the road, right on the centre lines, with some stag's antlers glued and glued to the top of his head and held together with rope. It's a fairly gruesome sight. Nicola thinks, oh, this is great, isn't it? You know, I moved down from Liverpool, big city, lots of crime, down to rural Dorset, think it's going to be quiet, and the first thing I get is a gruesome murder. So, thus the tale unfolds. Nicola has to try and investigate what's caused this. Clearly, this guy didn't die of natural causes, and it turns out, after the post-mortem, somebody's killed him with an overdose of morphine. It helps in a way that people recognise the guy. He's a guy called Jim Tiernan. He's the landlord of the White Hart pub in the village, and he's well known to everybody. It's fair to say Jim's got a bit of previous. He's served time in Wandsworth for fraud, and he's known to be a bit of a lad, not always that keen on keeping books and flying a bit close to the wind, but he has turned the pub around and the brewery, despite the fact they're worried about his bookkeeping and the money going in and out of the pub. You recognise that he's done a good job. And there's basically two pubs in the village. There's the White Hart, which is a drinkers' pub, as all the boozers go, and he's put on bingo quizzes, etc., to build that customer base and done well. There's another pub in the village called the Fox, which has gone the other way, and is concentrated on being a foodie pub, and people travel from miles around to go there. And there's a feeling amongst the villagers that, maybe there isn't room for two pubs in the village. So there's that sort of underlying, aggravation, if you will, while Nicola is trying to find out what's going on. And being a small, I'll call it a village, I think it's a small town, everybody knows each other, and it appears that a lot of people have secrets. We have Frankie, the hairdresser, who's the world's worst liar, and when interviewed by Nicola soon realises that, Frankie's been somewhat economical with the actuality. We have a delivery driver called Eddie who's got a van, and he seems permanently nervous, as though somebody's going to catch him for something. We have an embittered farmer called Deakins, and part of the mystery of what's happened to Jim Tiernan is the fact that many years ago, there were 3 murders of a similar vein, and one of Deakin's family was hung for it, because in those days hanging was the result of being caught for murder. It would have been a lot easier if I just said hanging was capital punishment in those days. I digress. So Deakin's family have history, and Deakin is very, very suspicious of the police, and but there's this element of years ago the devil came to this part of Dorset, 3 people were killed, and being a small community, there are some that believe maybe he's come back again. Will there be another murder? So this is a really, really good murder mystery. You don't find out the purpose until right towards the end, but it's quite layered. We've got Nicola and her personal struggles, and I guess it wouldn't be a detective novel if the main detective didn't have some sort of personal crises going on. But we have a wealth of characters who all have got stuff to hide, and we've got some strong characters as well. Where there's a little girl in this book that's basically isn't treated very well by a wayward mother at home, and basically hides in the local park, gets on the top of the slide and keeps an eye on the village, and she plays a part. It's a very strong part there. So well written, well paced. It's a typical village, and we know that the killer of Jim Tiernan is in plain sight. There's a killer in plain sight. So really enjoyed it as a debut novel, a cracking read. From Googling, I see that the author's got a two book deal, so no doubt we'll see Nicola Bridge again. So really good murder mystery, 352 pages. You get empathy with the characters. The characters are well drawn, and it's a very modern, up-to-date type tale where some of modern day issues are addressed. So well worth a read. And for those that like a diagram, he says, treading cautiously, trying to knock the book over, and as usual makes a complete arse of it. Hang on a sec. So there's a little diagram in the book which shows where the pubs are and where the village is. So for those that like a graphic representation, should I say, that's there. So that's it for this week's brief book review. Good read. Not a lot to criticise really. As I said, well written, good characters, good murder mystery. That's it for this week. I'd give it 7 out of 10 any day of the week. Until we meet again, 10/10 till we do it again. Thanks for watching.